Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the After the Sermon podcast. I'm Pastor Matt. I am here with Pastor Ben.
Hey.
And we are here to discuss the contents of the life of Samson. And I'm thankful that we get to flip the chairs around this week, and I get to be the host and get to ask you all the questions. And based on your sermon from the life of Samson, it's always fun getting to be in this side of the podcast chair because apparently I never pay attention to close enough attention to how you open up the podcast, because I think I just jumped right to the interview portion of it. And I left out what this podcast even is. I didn't read the script. And so we're just going full on in to the podcast.
Much like Samson does with all the things in his life.
See, I set it up perfectly. That's what the host is supposed to do.
Yep. Those segues, they just don't drive him off a cliff. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Speaking of segues, I don't have a segue out of that. So we're going to just jump right into the life of Samson. Give us an overview. We, like with the life of Gideon, it's a full-on sprint in this sermon to cover the life of one individual in 35 minutes, because I know that's not what I preach. And it's hard to cover the life of an individual in a whole sermon. And we get to zoom in on different parts of the life and give an overview and then apply it to us. But we get to dive a little deeper here. So give us the overview, the life of Samson, and why his story is important to the story of grace.
Yeah. Starting in Judges 13, we see really the story of Samson starts before his birth. We get the appearing of an angel to these two people in the tribe of the Danites, and they say, you know what, you haven't had a kid, but you're going to have one. More importantly, this kid is going to be a Nazirite. And so he gives some really specific instructions for even before the baby is born, what they need to do and what the expectation is for their child, who is going to be Samson. And we talked Sunday, the Nazirite vow was something that was a voluntary vow. It is a setting aside of a particular time period in order to just dedicate oneself to the Lord. And so it's interesting to see that Samson didn't get to choose to be a Nazirite, and it's not really given a time period. It's essentially, right, the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb to the day of his death. It's his whole life. It's not just a few months or a couple years as he's working through something. Right, God has chosen Samson in this time to judge and lead the people of Israel against the Philistines who have been oppressing them. And so as Samson is born and grows and gets of age to become married, in chapter 14, we see that Samson sees one of the daughters of the Philistines and asks for her as his wife, which you typically don't marry the people who are oppressing you. And mom and dad are not real happy with that. And Samson says an important note. He says, get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. And that phrase that comes up in Judges, that people are doing whatever they feel like is right in their own eyes. It's specifically here spoken by Samson about himself. Even the judges themselves are not separated out from the sins of Israel and the continual disobedience and moving away from God. But as I said on Sunday, as we look at his life, Samson just has this vision problem, this seeing problem. He sees things, he wants it, no matter what it is, no matter what the consequences of getting that thing, whether it's, in this case, a Philistine wife, or later on, as we see, he just sees honey inside the carcass of a lion. And even though he's a Nazirite and he's supposed to stay clean, he grabs this honey and eats some, which the lion is a unclean animal to begin with, but then also a dead body, regardless of what is dead, is also unclean. And so Samson is just not really interested in his calling, but what he is interested in as he goes along is the strength that he gets from the Spirit of the Lord. He has a riddle that he gives to these Philistines that he just wants to trick them basically and extort them. And turns out that he ends up telling the answer to his new wife, who then in turn gives that answer to the Philistines, and Samson retaliates. Lots of death, lots of fighting, lots of not good stuff. But as he conquers the Philistines, because God did say, we see in the account of Judges that God was going to use this connection with the Philistines, this first wife of Samson, to help to destroy them. We see this very first element happening where Samson is successful. He strikes down 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. But even after all that, even after God does this incredible work in him and through him, Samson immediately complains. He says, I'm thirsty. You're going to let me die here. Just that questioning that, again, we see throughout Judges, throughout the Old Testament, and even in our own lives, that we think that God has abandoned us, as you said last week. But really, we're the ones that are far from God.
Yeah.
So as Samson goes on, he has some more women troubles. He goes after a prostitute, and then also after a woman named Delilah, which he just really ends up repeating the same mistakes. He's manipulative, he lies, he ends up telling the truth to his now maybe third, maybe there's been more. I don't know if he married the
Yeah.
prostitute or not. It's not 100% clear, but
It's not good.
it's not good. But also, you did this before. Why are you doing this again? He is not a great example of how to live life and be self-aware and learn from our mistakes. And so all of this ends up with Samson being captured. His hair is cut, which was part of the Nazarite vow. The strength of the Lord leaves him, so he's able to be overcome by the Philistines. So in his last act, he is chained to the pillars in this stadium to be sacrificed to the god of the Philistines. And Samson has been blinded. And in all of this, he finally cries out one more time to God and says, please remember me, strengthen me only this once. And what's interesting is, even at the end of his life, he doesn't say, so that you can save our people or that you can rid the land of this atrociousness. He says that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my two eyes. Even though he's calling out to God, his motivations still are not really great.
Right.
But God does indeed empower him and is able to use this moment to destroy this sect of the Philistines that are in this area through Samson's power, pushing against the pillars and having this whole place collapse on all the people who were in there.
Yeah, when you read through the story, we get captivated by Samson's strength. He's just growing up hearing it from a Sunday school perspective. And you think of Samson, you think of strength and strongness. And he becomes almost a type of masculinity where you're supposed to be, I've heard be Samson strong. But when you read his story, you're like, this is not the type of strength that God wants or looks for. It's a strength in his grace and in his power. And that's why I think Paul writes several times, hey, be strengthened in my grace. It's not a physical strength. It's not a personal strength that we're going after. We're strengthened in God's grace. The only reason Samson has that strength in the first place is because of God's spirit and God's calling in his life, and how quickly we lose sight of that. And that's why I love that you did Samson has a seeing problem, because we're very much in the same boat where we see something and we want it and we chase after it and we think it's right for us and we think it's good for us and we can handle it in our own strength. And then when over time, we just never learn that lesson. And so how does Samson's story of strength and God's calling in his life remind us that your first point was we have to see all the points. We have to see God's grace. Like it's going to the eye doctor a little bit and getting our eyes checked and focusing in on God's grace specifically for our lives. So how does Samson's calling and God's grace in his life impact our lives, and how can we see that grace in our own lives?
Yeah, the first thing, as we see in the account of Samson with his being chosen as a Nazarite before he's even conceived, right? That God
Yeah.
had a plan for every life, and God's grace concerns every life. And it helps us both looking at our own lives, because it's easy to look back and go, man, I really screwed up. I don't understand how God can use a person like me, or I'm in a tough season right now that I don't understand what worth do I have? What value can I offer when I can't even take care of,
Yeah.
my financial situation or my sin situation, whatever it might be. Again, I would not, as you just said, tout Samson as manly man, be just like him. Yet he's listed in the Hall
Yep.
of Fame in Hebrews 11.
Yep.
And his story, there's a reason that we get so much details about his story. It could have been a sentence that said, Samson killed 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey, and that could have been it,
Yeah.
like
Like
Shamgar.
Shamgar. Yep.
But no, we get to see this very imperfect person. If we had any doubt that God can use anybody, if God can use Samson, you. But also that the way we view other people, we have to not discount God's grace in their life either. That there is nobody that can be too far from God.
There's this temptation that we have is when we say at Grace Life, we are here to share God's grace with every life. There's a temptation to find the low-hanging fruit and show grace with them. It's easy to show grace to someone who looks like they have it together, but it's really difficult to show grace to someone who doesn't have it together, who is really just trying to figure this thing out. They're navigating life in Christ now, or they're looking for Christ, right? And then we're trying to help them see the grace of Jesus. So you look at Samson's life and you're like, oh, we'll show grace to him. He's strong. He's got it together, right? He can look at all he's accomplished. Look at his resume. Internally, though, he's a mess. But in a moment of weakness, when he has no eyesight, he has no freedom, his final act in life is to place all of his faith in the Lord. And I love how the scripture says when Samson is right about to do this, oh Lord, please remember me and please strengthen me only this once, oh God. He cries out like, I can't do this in my own strength. I have to rely on the strength of God. And the same applies to us. And kind of to wrap up our time together, how can we see that God's grace conquers all things? It is the strength that we must rely on in all things.
Yeah, Romans 8 is where we landed on Sunday with the imagery that Paul puts there of nothing can separate us from the love of God. And then he lists things that are very kind of real life we can understand, and then also things that are like hard to understand, right? Starts, I'm sure, neither death nor life, but then nor angels or rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, powers, height, depth, and anything else in creation, right? He doesn't leave anything out. And so, yeah, once we are saved by Christ, even though our sanctification, right, is going to have the ebbs and flows, we are secure. In John 10, Jesus talks about how no one can pluck my the believers, those who believe in me, out of my Father's hand.
Right.
There is a security. And even again, Samson in his life, again, is not clearly following God's instructions yet. Even the Philistines can't really truly take away the true power. They cut his hair, they overpowered him, sure. But at the end of the day, God is still the one who is actually empowering him. The Nazarite vow wasn't a magical thing. It wasn't the key to his success. Truly, it is ultimately his faith in a God who strengthens him, the Spirit of the Lord in him, who is allowing him to continually push back against the Philistines.
Right. Yeah. Any last thoughts on the life of Samson and his story that would be good for our church to be reminded of?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit on Sunday, but just as we look at a messy life like this, and it's easy to be tempted to say, I definitely don't do that. But that's not the point of Samson. It's not to go, oh man, this guy was extremely off kilter and yet God used him. And so if I'm a little off kilter, God can still use me.
Yeah.
Romans 6 and 7 speaks against that idea. It's not that grace abounds so that sin may abound even more. But Samson's story should soberly remind us, like, without the
Mm,
grace of God, our lives look
right.
like that and worse. It's not a permissive tale of it's okay for me to manipulate. It's okay for me to chase after the things of the world. It's really a warning in some ways. If, I don't know this for sure because I'd have to go back and look at every story of the judges. But the judges who tend to get more story time tend to be less good examples of how to live.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we shouldn't walk away from Samson going, yes, I want to be a mighty man of valor. But instead, we should humbly go, man, I can't do anything without
Yeah.
God's grace.
Right. Yep. Yep. All right. As we look ahead to the next week, this coming week, we will talk about the book of Ruth as we approach the first book named after a woman. And her story is incredible. And we've already touched on it just a tad this past week, but her story takes place in the midst of the book of Judges. And so during the time of Judges, we have this story take place. It's a story of redemption and a story of grace. And if you haven't had a chance yet, read through the book of Judges. Read the stories of Ehud and Deborah and Barak and Jephthah. And there's just great stories throughout. It closes out with just more war and fighting. And then we get to the last verse and they continue to do what's right in their own eyes. But it's in this darkest hour in the life of Israel. And they're about to make some dumb decisions, even more so, where they demand a king. That time's coming. And God's going to continue to take their failures and their unfaithfulness and use it to accomplish his purposes. And so look forward to walking through the entire book of Ruth this coming Sunday. It takes about 10 minutes to read through, if that. So I encourage you to read through the entire book before we gather on Sunday. It'll really help you in your understanding of what's taking place. And then we'll look forward to discussing it in life groups. We love you guys and look forward to being with you in life groups or this coming Sunday. If you need anything, reach out. God bless.